said, Dr. Kelly, at your advanced age, do you ever think about dating anymore? She said, yes, Wink. As a matter of fact, I have 4 boyfriends. I said, really? She said, yes, I get up in the morning with Will Power. I walk with Arthur Itis. I come home with Charlie Horse. And I go to bed at night with Ben Gay.
And welcome to a new edition of the award-winning Talking About Cars podcast, where it's all about everybody has a car story, from celebrities to car personalities and even disc jockeys. I'm Randy Cardoon. You know, I was born here in L.A. I grew up listening to something you just don't hear about anymore. I mean, sure, there were guys that play music and they're kind of wacky, but back then they called them personality disc jockeys. One of the best, who moved on to become well-known for hosting game shows, was Wink Martindale. And here's a plus. He was the first DJ to interview a young singer by the name of Elvis. That's right, the Elvis Presley. In fact, before he married his current wife, Sandy, apparently she dated Elvis Presley. Wink also had a song called Deck of Cards, which hit number 7 on the charts back in 1959. He didn't sing it. He narrated it to music. Wink's game shows, well, you've heard of them. They included Tic-Tac-Dough, High Rollers, Gambit, Bumper Stumpers, and Debt. You've probably heard about all these game shows, but you probably haven't heard much about Wink Martindale's car history. After all, that's what this podcast is all about, talking about cars. Wink joined Hot Rod Bob Beck and I at the Hollywood show, and we asked him about his first car.
I remember carrying a paper route when I was very young, 13 years old. At the same time, I was a soda jerk at Baker's Drug Store at Main and Shannon in downtown Jackson, Tennessee. And then when I got to be 16 years old, I got a job at a radio station, a little 250-watter in Jackson, right out of high school. And I was making $25 a week. Within 8 months, I was making $40 a week. And I still didn't have a car. And so one day, I was walking home from the radio station down Poplar Street, and on my left was Newsom Brothers Used Cars. And they just dealt in used cars, but good-looking used cars. And so I thought, isn't it about time that I think about getting a car rather than riding a bicycle?
Ooh, yeah.
So I walked around the cars, and of course the salesman came up to me and said, why are you here? Because I was 16, 17 years old. And I said, well, I'm just, thinking about buying a car. Long story short, I ended up buying a 1948 Plymouth. And it was solid dark green, and I was so proud of that automobile. I didn't have enough money to pay for it cash, so my dad lent me the money reluctantly because he wasn't so sure this radio job was going to be a long-range thing.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
So that was my first car.
Wow.
1948 automobile.
1948.
And it was in great shape, and it looked like it was brand new. So I knew how to pick them.
Wow.
And my next car, after that, a few years later, I drove that 48 automobile until I was married and bought a Cadillac.
Oh.
It was a 1954 or 55 Cadillac, the one with the long things on the rear. What do you call it?
Tail lights and the
tail
kind of
light.
looks
The
like
fins.
a military
The
plane.
fins, yeah, the
There we
fins
go.
is what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, this is the prettiest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was used, but again, it belonged to Mr. W.P. Dabney, who was the #1 furniture dealer there in Jackson. So obviously, he traded for new cars every year, and this one was just like new.
Wow.
And that was my second car.
You must have been doing pretty well in the radio thing by then.
I was up to $45 a week.
Ooh.
Yeah, or as Merv Griffin said, ooh.
Ooh, there we go.
So now I auditioned for a job at WHBQ Radio in Memphis, And I got my dream job called Clock Watchers. All the kids in Jackson listened to WHBQ. It was only 5,000 watts, but it came into Jackson like a local, and they played a lot of music. So all the kids listened to WHBQ. So when I got out of high school and got a little experience in Jackson, sent an audition tape thinking I'd never hear from them, and they got right back to me in 2 weeks wanting me to come over for an interview. So I went over, my dad drove me over, and I did the interview. I got the job, and about a year later, I bought the first new car that I ever had up to then. And it was the most gorgeous automobile that I had ever seen. And I remember picking up my future wife, my date at the time, Madeline Leach. Remember, it was Easter Sunday morning, and she had never seen my new car. It was from Tate Brothers. It was a Pontiac dealership. And it was one of those long Pontiacs in 1953-54. Beautiful car with leather upholstery on the inside, and it was yellow and white, combination yellow. Just a gorgeous automobile. And so that was my first new car.
So a 53-54 Pontiac?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I drove that for a number of years, and you know, it goes on from there. So I don't want to bore you any further with all of my cars, but that's the way it all started for me.
I like Pontiacs. I'm a Pontiac guy.
He's endeared himself to both of us. I got the 48 Plymouth, and you've got the Pontiac.
I'm a Pontiac guy myself.
Yeah.
I've got a 57 Pontiac two-door wagon, kind of like the Chevy Nomad. So that's always kind of neat. You knew Elvis back in the day.
Who?
Some singer. Some singer. I don't know, went on to some acclaim. I don't
Yeah,
know,
a little
people
bit. Did a
kinda
bunch of
liked him.
movies.
Yeah, a bunch of movies, yeah. Hunk Hunk, Burn Love, the whole thing.
Yeah.
This is an odd question. I don't even know if you know the answer to this, but so you've had him.
The answer is no.
Okay, well, that could be, but that wasn't the question. But it's actually.
And the answer is?
And the
Yeah.
answer
Wait a minute.
is.
Hey, here's an idea.
Wait a minute, that's a
I'll
different
give you
answer.
the answer. You give me the question. I think we have a TV show.
Hey, we can do that.
All right, there we go. All right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I like that.
fine.
We may do that later on. So he would come into your station, whichever station it was. Do you ever remember what he drove or what drove him into the studios?
Well, the first time I ever met him was a night in July in 1954. The night of the afternoon that he made his first record called That's All Right Mama. And I happened to be at the station, WHBQ Radio, that night. And I'm the only living person who was in the control room the night that he was discovered. The night that That's All Right Mama was played by Dewey Phillips on Red Hot and Blue for the very first time on WHBQ Radio. And I was the one designated by Sam Phillips, who had walked in with this acetate of this singer that he had just recorded that afternoon. I was one designated to call Gladys and Vernon, his mom and dad, find out where he was. Mrs. Presley answered the phone. She said, well, he was so nervous about his record being tested on the radio tonight, he went to see a double feature Western. He said, he's at the Suzors Theater. So they got in their car, their truck actually, and went down, walked up and down the dark aisle, found him sitting there all by himself watching this Western, whispered to him about the excitement being generated by That's All Right Mama, because the switchboard lit up as soon as Dewey Phillips, the DJ, started playing it. And so they brought him down to the station. He was interviewed that night. I met him that night, and he remained my friend until the day he left us. But I tell that story simply because I have no idea what his first car was. I only know that he was brought to the station that night in his parents' truck.
His parents' truck.
Yeah. And of course, he had an affinity for automobiles, as you might well imagine. He drove a lot of different cars. He bought a lot of different cars. He gave away a lot of different cars to his friends. He would buy 6 or 8 cars. In fact, there was one situation where he bought 12 cars from one of the auto dealerships, I forget which one, in downtown Memphis, and gave a new car for Christmas to each of the guys in his Memphis Mafia.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. But as far as, I know you love Cadillacs.
I was going to say, to be the owner of the Cadillac dealership in Memphis at that time when Elvis was running in, it's like, I'll take that one and that one and that one.
Yeah, they love to see Elvis coming.
Get the detailer ready.
Yeah.
Wow, really? That's great. So
I
what
could-
about the car that got away? The car that you had that you no longer had, that if given the option, you could get it back?
That would probably be that Pontiac I was telling you
Okay.
about. Because had I known how special that car really was when it was brand new, and I took such good care of it, I probably would have kept it, put it in the garage, and just hung on to it for a few years anyway. Now my wife and I drive Lexus automobiles, and I think the Japanese know, I think, probably better than anybody how to build an automobile. They sure do a great job of it. I just love driving the Lexus, and I've had it for a number of years, and I keep driving it because I finally got it paid for.
Is there any type of car that you'd like to have that you've never had before, that you've seen pictures of?
Everybody's got a list.
Everyone's got
got a list of a car that
Yeah.
you'd want someday.
Yeah, I think that if I had my choice of cars and could afford any car that I wanted, it would be a Bentley.
Okay.
I love a Bentley. And I have a friend who has a Bentley, and I hate him.
Friend, are
He's
you
sitting
listening?
right behind you.
Oh, okay.
Very good. Very
No,
good.
it's a great car.
So you did a lot of shows, game shows, and we've always seen a lot of your tic-tac-toe and all the other ones that you've done. From time to time, I would imagine you've given away cars on the show.
You mean a brand new car
That's the one.
A brand new car, yeah.
and
So-
a year's supply of Lee's press-on nails? And how about some rice-a-roni, the San Francisco
Okay,
cake?
there we go. Yeah.
Oh man! Suddenly, I'm being transported back and back and back. What was the wackiest moment that you can remember when you gave away? Let's just for this podcast purposes, a car.
A car.
And somebody kind of got a little too excited or reacted in something over the top.
Well, let me put it this way. That's the story of the car that you mentioned is the tail end of this story. But on Tic-Tac-Dough, in the fall of each year, each season, we did what we called an over 80s tournament where all the players were over the age of 80. And I was doing an interview with Dr. Reba Kelly, who was 96 years young. She was a widower. And I said, Dr. Kelly, just making conversation. And I'm sure that the producers gave her this answer because we had most of our interviews in those days were sort of planned out so we could get to them real like
They
fast.
weren't ad lib.
not,
Oh, no.
not fully ad lib, some,
Okay.
Yeah.
but
Okay.
not fully.
Right.
So anyway, I said, Dr. Kelly, at your advanced age, do you ever think about dating anymore? She said, yes, Wink. As a matter of fact, I have 4 boyfriends. I said, really? She said, yes, I get up in the morning with Will Power. I take a walk with Arthur Itis. I come home with Charlie Horse, and I go to bed at night with Ben Gay. We had to stop tape on that one because the audience, and I fell down. That's the kind of thing that you dream about, having happen on your show when you're a host. But as far as the car is concerned, Tom McKee was my biggest winner ever on Tic-Tac-Toe. And Tom was on for 47 straight days. He won $317,000 and change. And of course, that was before the $1 million shows. But in those days, when we're talking about in the 80s, $317,000 to $20,000 was a lot of money. I mean, still a lot of money, but you know what I mean. It's not $1 million. But he was on for 47 straight days.
Wow.
And he finally got beat. But while he was on and winning all that money, he won 8 automobiles. He won 8 Buicks. That's what we gave away at the time. Every time you beat the dragon at
Right.
the gambit, at the board, not the gambit board, but the tic-tac-toe board,
Right.
you won a car. And so he won 8 cars. And I remember he gave one of his Buicks to a brother who was a missionary in Africa. And the other 7 he kept and he sold. And with most of that money, he bought himself a big Mercedes. And he had the license plate Tic-Tac, T-I-C-T-A-C, which he still has to this day, though he's in the real estate business now and lives back in New Jersey. But as far as you asked me about cars, that's what I think about when I think about cars and game shows.
That's pretty wild
that's cool.
story. That is a very cool story.
8 Buicks for one
I want to know
Mercedes.
how he shipped the Buick to Africa. Now that might have been
That would
interesting.
have been interesting, yeah.
I don't know how he did that, but I know that's for a fact that's what he
8
did.
Buicks.
8
That's got to
Buicks.
be a record for the
Some
number
of those Buicks sold in one time.
Well, it was a lot at that time. Of course, it was a big deal at the time because Tic-Tac-Toe was an enormously popular show. Number 1 in its prime access time period following Joker's Wild. And for a person to win that much money and that many that many cars was quite something. It was special. So I don't know how he got that car to Africa, but he had enough money to get it there one way or the other.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is really neat, though. That I think is a fun
The
story.
only Buick in Africa.
But just to one guy, that's an interesting. That's got to be some sort of game show record where.
It was at the time till Ken Jennings came along on Jeopardy and became the biggest winner of all time on Jeopardy, with several $1 million. And then a guy came along after him and won even more and became the new all-time champion. But in the days of tic-tac-toe, Tom McKee was the big winner.
Well, and it's probably the most amount of cars given to one guy
person.
in any game show
I guess.
that I'm thinking about.
I guess.
Short of
So you're still in the record books, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty big
Right,
stuff.
when you have someone like that that's winning and winning and you're getting the publicity, how does that affect you in the show?
Well, of course, it affects the show enormously because the ratings every night that he stayed on, the ratings went up a couple of notches.
Yeah.
So it was terrific for the show because it was our first full season.
Oh,
so
even
what
better.
a way to kick off the show.
Yeah.
Now, was that show a morning show at that point, or was it like an evening?
No, it's funny. We started. It's funny. That's a story in itself. We did the pilot for CBS on Tic-Tac-Toe, and it lasted on less than 13 weeks and got canceled because it didn't find an audience at 10 o'clock in the morning. And station managers and program directors around the country, when the show came out, it had so much publicity surrounding it that they bought that show not only for their morning audience, but for the syndicated audience in the evening, in the prime access time periods. So all of a sudden it gets canceled off CBS. And these guys who are running these stations are pulling their hair out thinking, oh my God, we bought this for 2 years. We got to pay for it, whether we play it or play it. We got to pay for it anyway. So, but wouldn't you know that it came on in September in syndication. It had bombed miserably in the daytime on CBS, but when the first book came out that fall, it went through the roof.
Wow.
And was an enormous hit, and we never looked back.
Wow.
How long was it on the air?
I did it for 9 years, and it was on the air for about 12 years. Of course, it had been on the air in the late 1940s with Jack Barry, and I was lucky enough to get it when it was just right for the audience.
Good time.
You were talking about how when Jeopardy has now this run, it becomes such big news in this social media age.
Sure.
Can you imagine what it would have been like when Tic-Tac-Toe, if there was a social media age back then?
Oh, I can only imagine.
You'd be driving the Bentley.
You'd be driving the
I would have made a heck of a lot more money now than I did then, I'll tell you that.
Forget the Lexus, here comes the Bentley.
Exactly, the Bentley would be here. Very good.
To give you an example, Alex Trebek is up to around $30 million a year now, and so is Pat Sajak. But see, those shows have been on the air every year for like 34, 35 years, and the money goes up for them every year. So that's I can just think back on how successful Tic-Tac-Toe was along Joker's Wild in those days, and had there been a social calendar, so to speak, would have been. I'd probably have my Bentley, like you said.
Of the shows you've done and all the radio you've done, what is the one that you've liked the most?
I think that I loved High Rollers, where we rolled the big dice.
I remember that.
Alex was the first one to do that one, and then when he left, I took that over for Hero Quigley Productions. But I think that I'd have to say Tic-Tac-Toe because of its lengthy run. And you get used to those regular checks coming in week by week by week,
I'll have to find out about that.
Plus, it was an easy game to play, and the audience at home liked it a lot.
Yeah.
They played along with it. It was simple, no big long list of rules, just a very simple game to play. And so it was easy to host, easy to be the MC on that show, and gave me a chance to show my own personality. And I met so many wonderful people and so many celebrities.
You've got a book out?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Well, it's not a brand new book. I did it several years ago, but we sold a lot of copies here today. It's called Winking at Life, and it's just my life story. And I wrote it all myself. I didn't have any help. And it just goes from my birth through my current career. And it's interesting because I had several, when I finished the manuscript, I shopped it around, and I had several major publishers that were interested, but when they found out there was no dirt in it, unless I could conjure up some dirt, you know what I mean by dirt,
Yeah.
Of course.
then they weren't going to take it.
No drama.
And I said to those guys, I said, there's no dirt around a game show. Backstage, it's dull, So, needless to say, I couldn't peddle it, so I published it myself.
Okay, Bob and I were recently on a game show. And we experienced what we can call...
Mental block?
I like to call it, basically stuck in the headlights syndrome, where you're on there and the host comes up to you and asks you a question, and you, of course, under every circumstance, would nail these questions. You know what these questions are. But in the show we were on,
America Says.
America Says, which was on the Game Show Network. And so we're both car guys. I'm the sports director at a radio station. And so they asked us hockey questions and car questions. And I believe the phrase humana humana, where we looked like Jackie Gleason doing humana humana all the time. And so people who are listening, who are one day will be on a game show, what advice do you give people who are going to be on a game show?
Well, first of all, I think that the best contestant is the person who just loves to not necessarily have his 15 minutes of fame, but a person who enjoys games, enjoys playing games, just like people at home. They enjoy watching people play games on television. And those contestants, if you're going to be a contestant on a show, you should bone up on the kind of show it is. In other words, if it's a Q&A show, like a Jeopardy or whatever, then you should watch that show for a lengthy period of time, if possible, and kind of figure out what would be your strategy. Were you standing up there trying to buzz in ahead of your other two players? So do your homework, do your research on that show, and come out there and just have a good time. Enjoy yourself.
See, Bob,
We
I
did that.
think people watched us and learned what not to do on that show.
We got calls from all over the country.
We did, or if we didn't, they did.
Was
saying,
that you that screwed up that question?
Yeah, don't let them on again.
Yeah.
All right. very
We
cool.
actually didn't have a chance to review the show. It was a new show.
It was a new show, so
and
we
they
weren't really
hadn't-
sure.
Hadn't aired it yet.
Yeah.
But we got stumped. The hockey question he missed. The car question I missed.
Yeah.
It was something simple. Name a car part that begins with an H. I went blank. Heater was the answer.
Yeah.
Yes,
We missed it.
they said they had a letter that you're supposed to come up with, WG, involving in hockey. I completely didn't think of Wayne Gretzky. so,
Yeah.
we all live and learn, right?
Right.
Live and learn.
And we had our wives with us to support us, and they.
They did the same thing.
Was that before the divorce or after the divorce?
Well, we're in counseling.
DJ, game show host, and more, Wink Martindale. I'm talking the announcer one, not the defensive coordinator. Remember, you can subscribe for free to Talking About Cars. Until next time, I'm Randy Cardoon for Hot Rod Bob Beck. Join me as we have some more fun talking about cars.